Welcome one, welcome all into a subdued edition of Lion Central Radio. I am Nick Castora, my co-host Brandon Lisklew, always alongside for the ride. Also joining us for the first part of the program, you know him as Kent Lee Platte. You've seen him on Twitter at MathBomb, read his stuff on Sideline Report. Always happy to have him along. Maybe a little less so happy this week to have anyone to have to deal with what we're going to go through on the program, which is a tough Lions loss. Not even tough, just a bad Lions loss to the Patriots. You all saw it, 34-9 was the final score. We'll run through every aspect of it. We know there's a lot you guys want us to talk about, and we will get to every angle. Good, bad, worse, ugly, just all of it. We're going to start with our biggest takeaways, as we always do. Eventually, at some point, we will look forward to the Chicago game on Thanksgiving, which is still a huge game for this team, and a lot of good still can come. But for now, it's the bad and the ugly that came against New England. And I start with my co-host, Brandon Lisklew.
Well, I want to kick off this holiday edition. We're coming at you a day early by thanking all of you for listening to the show. We really appreciate it. We like how we're starting to interact with you guys more on Twitter, a little bit more on Facebook. And we want to go ahead and thank you in advance for sharing the show with a friend, a family member, even the crotchety neighbor down the street. It doesn't matter to us as long as we continue to grow this show. We'll keep bringing it to you. Hopefully with better tidings next time, but for now we're going to have to transition to the things not to be so thankful for. One thing I'm not thankful for is the lack of concentration. That is my biggest takeaway from this game. The Lions, surprisingly enough, we're still in this game in the fourth quarter, but little errors killed them. It's something that happened last year. It's something that happened the year before. When they get out to these big promising starts and they don't seem to have the focus on small level details. And the proof is in the pudding as far as, there were receiver drops. The defense, I don't know if Cassius Vaughn knows that he's supposed to go to practice and team meetings throughout the week because he doesn't look like he has any idea what's going on out there.
I think he thinks he knows what's going on. I think he thinks he has a really good idea what's going on. It's just he's just so bad.
Yeah, he was especially atrocious, but I think the topper of them all, the Cool Whip on top of this pumpkin pie, had to have been Stafford missing that slide. With him being just 4 yards away from the sticks and to slide. And one thing I want to address real quick off the top is that it wasn't a gutless thing by him. This guy is tougher than nails. He's taken the second most quarterback hits this year. We've seen him throw a game-winning touchdown pass with a separated shoulder. So please keep that junk to yourself. But that lack of concentration to the small details of the game were what ultimately killed Detroit, in this, at least to me. Kent, how are you feeling today?
Oh, about the same. It actually surprised me a lot in the game because you guys know how big of a fan I am of Terrell Austin. I've always been a really big fan of that hire. Our defense has been killing it this year. The Freehurt defense has been tearing it up. But this was his worst game by far as a play caller. He was terrible in how he handled his assignments in this game. And it wouldn't have even helped as much if guys were executing well because they really were at first. It's just nobody was anywhere near any receivers. They were just all over the place because the play calls were so bad. I haven't seen a single game this year where Terrell Austin was so far off of this game. And it was the exact opposite on the other side. I've been extremely critical of Joe Lombardi. I'm really not a big fan of his. But this game was actually called fairly well, very well if you're looking at his standard for the last 10 games.
Yep.
But even with the play call finally clicking, the guys weren't doing what they were supposed to do. I mean, you already nailed it with the drops. I mean, we had, 4 or 5 touchdown drops alone. One big drop by Ebron, a huge touchdown drop by Fourier and Ross and Fuller.
Yeah.
Just everywhere. So the play calls were finally there, and dumbing down the offense had to have been a big part of it. Changing the way that they were doing it had to have helped a lot. But you'd figure with that kind of a change, the guys would have executed better because there was less to think about. But it seems like, I don't know if they were overthinking it, but the offensive play calling got better and everything else fell apart.
Yeah, you touched on Lombardi, and last week we saw they did not get Golden Tate involved nearly enough in the second half. He didn't have any targets last week, only 2 in the first. And we saw the first play in this game, they go to Tate on a screen just to get him involved early. I wanted to see more of that as the game went on. Their first drive, they did settle for a field goal, which is the microcosm of everything they've been doing. The biggest takeaway is just the ineptitude of the offense, and that's what we're going to rail against for a lot of the early portion of this program. I'll give you folks just the raw numbers as much as you might not want to hear them in this one. Stafford ends up 18 of 46 for 264 and one pick, no TDs, obviously. Joique Bell got all the carries, well, not all of them, but most, 19 for 48, no scores as well. And then the passing, for what it was really spread out. Golden Tate and Calvin both with 4, Riddick Ross with 3, Ebron with 2, Fuller and Bell each had 1. It was the hardest thing with trying to pinpoint the problem, there was a ton in this game, is there's not just one person to blame. I was listening to local radio today, and a lot of guys were trying to just pin it on Stafford, and as bad as Stafford did have a bad game, but there were those drops. And this offensive line, which we're going to get into, is so makeshift at this point. We're looking at Cornelius Lucas on the left side now, probably with Reef out. We'll get into that injury. I mean, you see, you can't be happy with Stafford after an 18 of 46 performance, and I wasn't, and I don't think he played well, but I mean, look at this offensive line and what this team's going to have to deal with moving forward. I don't know where it gets better from that standpoint, because seeing Lucas out there and still not knowing what's going on with our right guard Warford, and then you have Waddle on the other side, I don't know where the light comes in that regard, Brandon.
Well, and Cornelius Lucas on the left side is more reminiscent of Halloween than Thanksgiving. He's a nightmare out there, and it's right away he gives up a sack to Ayers, where it wasn't even that difficult for Ayers to get there.
That was a long distance that he made that run, though. He went all the way across Lucas, man, all that length, and he didn't touch him at all.
Well, he was too busy retreating, so worried about getting beat on the outside that he just gave it up right across his face. All in all, he gave up 5 pressures on the day. Ironically or coincidentally, Adrian Waddle, I think, might have had his best game of the year. They did all right running along behind that right side of Swanson and Waddle. They averaged 4 yards per carry over there, which is, well, I mean, that's almost unheard of for Detroit these days. And it did get a little bit better as the game moved on. I counted about 12 passable pockets, I'll say, where Stafford was at least somewhat comfortable. But yeah, when Stafford has to throw that many passes and he has to do so under constant duress, you can't put it on the quarterback, at least completely. I mean, I only charted him as having about 3 bad throws. There were 3 others that looked to be miscommunications with Tate. But I will say that it was nice to see that Tate was such a premium part of the offense. To me, I still think Stafford played pretty decently. There were beautiful balls that should have been touchdowns. That Tate fade that they threw, I think, on the first or second third down conversion they had, that thing was beautiful. I mean, it dropped right in him. The defender never even saw it. And then when the later pass when he had to Golden Tate, that went for about, 40 yards or so, he did an excellent job of climbing the ladder. The pocket was kind of pinching in behind him, so he moved up in the pocket and rifled it right to Tate. Overall, my knee-jerk reaction was Stafford didn't have a great game, but I thought he kind of actually he performed better than I thought once I saw the tape. Did Stafford really cost this team this game besides the slide aside, or was there at least some hope from him?
No, he actually looked a lot better the second time around than watching it the first time. I thought he did better than most were saying the first time around, but I still thought he had a pretty bad game. But watching it the second time around, he had nothing in that game. And it's actually funny you said that you had 3, because I also had 3 bad passes. They're probably the same ones too, because they were pretty bad. But you're gonna have those. Honestly, I think there was that many from Tom Brady too. But there were passes that you mentioned. The one to Tate, he had that beautiful scramble from the pocket where he was able to evade pressure not once but twice by spinning away, which he's gonna eventually have to evade some of that pressure the way this line is. But he commanded the offense. He moved things well. Things started to slow down for him in that offense. It was really nice to see. But like I said, everything else fell apart. And it's going to fall on Stafford, and people are going to blame him for it. But it was everything but in that game.
Well, and another thing, it was everything but. We've always been we've already kind of touched on it a bit, but I really was somewhat impressed with Lombardi this game. At least maybe people would say, oh, he's admitting defeat, or this team is too stupid to run his scheme. But, they're taking it down by 20%. I mean, you've got guys like Eric Ebron who are rookies. The offensive line is, granted, he didn't know he was going to be dealing with Cornelius Lucas on the left side, but they can't handle all the different blocking protections up front. But one thing I really loved, they ran some goal line fades. They used the big guys, and there should have been at least one touchdown from that. Foria had the ball in his hands. He's got to bring that down. That's his job. They did get the holding penalty before that. I really like the play action rollout to kind of get Stafford away from pressure. They took some shots downfield that unfortunately guys like Corey Fuller dropped. I don't know if you guys saw, there was a screenshot on Twitter of the ball. He didn't even touch it. Like, it was such a beautiful rainbow.
He was blinded by the light, Brandon. He was blinded by the light, my friend.
Yeah, watching it the first time through, that's what it looked like, is that the sun was in his eyes. And from the second time, I don't think he ever knew where the ball was. I think, honestly, he just threw his hands up and hoped that it would land there.
Oh.
Well, that kind of was reminiscent of the Lions wide receivers throughout the day. Even Calvin Johnson he was rather human in this game, I thought. But there's plenty of blame to go around in that receiving core. I'm sure Nick, I think he has one particular guy in mind that he would like to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I want to talk about him, but it's just kind of how it goes on this program. There's been a lot against Eric Ebron, and then it was really highlighted in this game. And Kent, I've been following your stuff on Twitter, obviously, and we'll get into it here. We'll kind of do our debate with it, because I was against the pick when they made it. I've been very vocal about that on the program, and Brandon supported it from the get-go. And for me, and in this game, and a lot of people saw the one really just egregious drop in this game. He had a couple of catches as well. I think he had 2 in the game. But I haven't seen anything from Eric Ebron to change my mind, to make me think, okay, I see the light coming. I see it getting better. I see where I should wait and be patient with this pick, when I see all of the other guys that they passed on in favor of Ebron, the other weapons that they could have used on this offense, doing things immediately. So I don't just want to rant here. I mean, I'll give you guys your due here. Explain to me why I should still be patient with Eric Ebron when all I see are these drops and him not learning the offense in a timely manner whatsoever.
Ken, why don't you go ahead and start? I've got some numbers I'll throw at him once you're done.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot for him to digest. They're trying to do some stuff with Ebron that he did not do when he was in college, and he did quite a bit while he was in college at UNC. I saw a lot of it during camp. I haven't really seen as much of it during the season, so I'm actually somewhat surprised that he hasn't picked it up faster than he has. That is a concern. They're doing a lot more with him in practices than we've been seeing during the games. They're putting him in the backfield. They're putting him in motion quite often. We haven't really been seeing that all that often, and I think a lot of it has to do with how he's picking it up, and that's where we're seeing the downside to Ebron right now, is that he's not picking it up as fast as he can. The second problem is that when he does do something that's noteworthy, that's worthwhile, he always seems to either prelude that or follow it up by something really stupid. And we saw that in this game. He had that awful drop, and it was inexcusable. That drop was awful. I don't care whether the light was in his eye. He had like 6 feet on his defender. It was an easy catch, and he missed it. But later on in the game, when it didn't really matter anymore, he ran one of the most beautiful out routes you're going to see from a tight end, and you might not see wide receivers that could run it that well. And that's the kind of stuff that they need to be doing more with him, and hopefully we'll start to see it. I wrote a couple of weeks back on Sideline Report that the Lions they needed to start featuring Ebron more. They haven't been. It's nice to finally see them doing it. I really do wish that they were seeing more out of it. But the problem to me is just when you do see something good, there's also something bad to go with it. There's always going to be that fuel for the naysayers, and that's frustrating from somebody who actually likes him as a prospect.
Well, I don't know if for anybody that follows both Nick and I on Twitter, and I can understand following me, but for some people who want to throw a pity follow, Nick really appreciates it.
This is what I deal with week in and week out. Continue.
But anyways, during the game, Nick made a disparaging tweet that I hope he has since deleted about Ebron, or however you say the name. We all know I'm going to butcher it. But I do want to, we were talking about Calvin Johnson versus Ebron, and your point was that Calvin Johnson brings so much more production and yada, yada, yada. Well, just this year, because that's all we can really go on. That's what we're worried about with this team. And as far as that's all we've seen from Ebron, obviously, Calvin Johnson has 38 receptions and 6 drops. So he is dropping one out of every one pass. He's dropping one pass for every 6.3 catches. Ebron has 16 receptions and 2 drops. Just so you don't have to get out your calculator, that's 1 for every 8. That's a better catch rate than Calvin Johnson. Also, I want to put this out there because tight ends are always guys who take a little bit of time to get chugging. There's that dude down in New Orleans. His last name's something Graham or something like that. Anyways, his rookie year, 31 receptions, 356 yards. Granted, he did have 5 touchdowns, but that's still not a lot of production. Vernon Davis, 20 catches, 265 yards, 3 touchdowns. All of that is well within reach for Ebron right now. It's way too early to start saying, well, we should have taken this guy, should have taken that guy, with the exception if obviously they lose Sue or Fairley and you can't draft off something that might happen your way. But Aaron Donald is by far the best defensive tackle to come out of that class.
I'm actually going to add to your stats real quick because on top of the Vernon Davis thing, Vernon Davis missed a good portion of his rookie season, and he didn't come on until the very end. You're going to find that those numbers that Abram's picking up, he's just below the injuries put him back, but at midpoint of the season, he was on pace to reach that average for first-round tight ends, and including the bigger names that weren't first-round like Gronkowski and Graham and those guys, but he was on pace to hit the average. And you don't want average out of a 10th overall pick, but he's only 4 catches and 1 touchdown away from where Vernon Davis was as a rookie.
Okay, I mean, Jay Samaro and Austin Seferian-Jenkins, who went way later in this draft, have been more productive. Look at the weapons that went around the same time, and Watkins and Evans, even Brandon Cooks and Odell Beckham, who are doing so much more.
Those are wide receivers. Those are not the same thing.
I'd actually lump Amaro in with those guys too. He's a receiver. He ain't a tight end.
When we made the pick, Brandon, you lumped Ebron in with those guys and called him a weapon and not a straight tight end. He's someone you can put in the slot. He's someone that's more of a receiver than he is a tight end. Why now, when he's struggling, is he suddenly we label him a tight end? Why does it change?
Because he's learning more positions than those guys. So you're talking about putting him in. I was talking about globally, his career, his skill set. Yes, but those guys only have to learn one position. Ebron is learning everything.
Yeah, well, even in college he couldn't catch the ball. He dropped 11% of his passes there. When am I expecting him to suddenly stop dropping passes and be a consistent pass catcher that we can rely on that doesn't have hands of stone? When does that happen?
I don't know. Do you like Calvin Johnson?
Love Calvin Johnson. He has the production.
He has one of the highest drop rates. He had a higher than 11% over his career drop rate. So if Ebron can go ahead and start amping up that production, that's what I'm saying. It's going to come with time. Then
I hate to seem like I'm just pushing it back and forth here, but I don't think you're ever going to see that drop percentage go very much farther below 11%. You're going to have a pretty decent drop rate from Ebron. Drop rate's one of those things that you might have it in college, you might not have it in college, you're going to have it as a pro. But if you have a drops problem in college, it's almost universally, continually a problem. The difference is I think you're going to start to see that production, like maybe not Calvin Johnson effect, that's putting the bar a little high, but you're going to start seeing some production from him that mitigates that. I mean, Jimmy Graham has one of the highest drop rates as a tight end, but nobody complains about it. I think he was 13% last year.
Wonderful. Keep bringing it. I love it.
No, but again, Brandon, that's my point though. It's if it and when it, and maybe that does happen. But to this point, I can't say that I've seen anything out of Eric Ebron to change my mind. If I didn't like him at the draft, which I didn't, what has happened for me to come on board with it? Nothing yet. Maybe it will down the road. I hope it does. I'm rooting for him. He's on the Lions. I want him to do well. This was a 10th pick. I don't want it to go to waste or anything like that. But there's nothing that's been done to say, okay, I see the wheels turning and things are getting better for Ebron at this point. Is it just we're waiting for year 2, or is there still growth we can see the remainder of this season?
Well, and I still think you will see some more, at least numbers, that'll make people feel better as we move forward. And a lot of that has to do with how they call the games. There have been missed opportunities with Stafford. We highlighted one, I can't remember what week that was. I want to say 4 or 5, where Ebron's just running straight down the middle. Nobody can run with him because he's that fast and that big. but Stafford completely whiffed on seeing him, and those things will come when they have some more chemistry. But for right now, you have to look at the things like Kent's talking about, the fact that he is so athletic and so big, but yet can run it out like he's Golden Tate. And yes, I'm exaggerating a bit, but my point is that he can move that quickly for a big guy. So you just have to go with the tape for now. You're not going to get the numbers you want.
Go ahead, Kent.
The biggest thing that's been a problem so far is that teams haven't been putting linebackers and safeties on Ebron. They've been putting on corners and slot guys to cover him. I mean, look at the drop. Ebron was covered by Revis at one point. I think it was the drop at that one. He had another one later that was deflected by Revis. He was covered by Revis on several plays. And that's not, there's nothing, on a completely unrelated note, it seemed like Revis was always where Stafford was throwing. I don't know if that was intentional or just good coaching by Belichick. But when teams are putting a cornerback onto a tight end because they know that he's that kind of a weapon, that's something that has to be taken into account. Teams are already avoiding putting a linebacker and a safety on him because they know they can't cover him that well.
Guys, I'm just my head. Fans were obviously fed up, and one thing I'll say is I saw a lot of tweets later saying why didn't they take Odell Beckham, and I agree obviously with the principle behind him being a weapon, and I'm very upset yesterday about Ebron and stuff, but revisionist history saying they should have taken Beckham. How many of those people were clamoring for Beckham at the time? I wanted Evans at the time. He wasn't available anyway, but Evans was the guy I was talking about before the draft. But none of you people wanted Beckham at the draft time anyway. So let's that one I want.
We were arguing about Evans back then. I said he was worth the top 10 pick. I'm pretty sure you weren't on board with that.
No, I didn't. My point is with Beckham. I mean, we discussed Evans. Neither of us and no other media people were saying Beckham. No fans wanted Beckham. So he did have a great game last night. The catch, everything with that.
I don't know if you guys saw it on my timeline, but I was making fun of a lot of that. Revisionist history has been fantastic for Lions fans this year. We wanted Denard or Gilbert, but no, we don't want them anymore. We wanted Fuller and Verrett, but then they got injured, so we didn't want them either. Dick started off poorly, so we didn't want him. Then he got better, and then we did want him. It's been hilarious this year, and part of it's just that this draft class has been so awesome as a whole, but it's been really funny watching how everybody's suddenly clamoring for these people who are doing good this week. And it's would be nice to have Ebron be that guy for once.
Well, let the tape show that I did want Clinton Dix around draft time. However, I digress. This Ebron debate isn't going anywhere, folks. Weigh in on Facebook and Twitter with us. What side you stand on? Based on Twitter reaction, most of you are with me, but please do get on there and help Brandon and Kent in the defense of the pro Ebron team as it stands right now.
Oh, no, don't. I will happily stand on my pedestal about a year from now and say, hey, remember when none of you guys were here? It's just me and Kent now.
Remember
you want to come over to our boat, huh?
Remember when Brandon said he's like Calvin Johnson and runs routes like Golden Tate? Yes, we will all remember Brandon. Anyway, we move forward. Also on the offensive side of the ball, which more negatives here, and one of them was Joique Bell really cooling off in this game. I'm going to attribute a lot of that to just the offensive line's inefficiencies as it's been most of the year. But what did you guys see? Kent, I'll start with you. What did you see from Joique Bell in this game and kind of with the running game moving forward? Do you see Reggie Bush hopefully back on Thanksgiving? Says he'll finally suit up, but do you see the running game getting any better in weeks coming forward?
Short answer, no. Longer answer, it depends on what we're going to be getting from the offensive line throughout the whole of the game, and I know that sounds like the same thing. Joique Bell started off against the Patriots doing really well. I always joke around about it on Twitter saying, we've got good Joique. Oh, well, bad Joique's back. We had good Joique for a good couple of minutes to start that game out. And what I mean by that is we have a player who's finding space where there isn't any and being patient behind his blocks when he should be patient behind his blocks. And he started out that way. But after the blocking started to break down and he wasn't getting anything, and he was getting the same inside runs called, and the Patriots saw it every time because it was telegraphed, Bell stops running, and that's so frustrating for me to watch any running back stop running. You got to keep your legs moving. You got to be patient behind your blocks, but if nothing's there, push yourself forward for a couple of yards. Get more than the 1 or the 2 that you're getting. And that's one of the biggest knocks that we had on Michael LeSure when he had his big chance, was that he would just stop. But we're not used to seeing that from Bell. And I've been cooler on Bell than most people have. But this is not the same guy that was running last season. It's definitely not the same guy that was running 2 years ago. He's starting to give up because his blocking isn't there. And the offensive line deserves blame for that. But when it comes down to it, that's still his job, and he needs to be doing it. I'm not sure we're going to get anything out of Bush when he comes back. The blocking is so poor. We're just going to get too many negative plays for it to matter. But we might get 1 or 2 big plays from Bush just because he's not giving up and he's fresh. But until that blocking improves, we aren't going to get anything.
Well, and I didn't. Yeah, there was nothing really there. I thought there were a few times that Bell would kind of squirt through and pick up 3-4 yards. Well, that's good for you. But we need to move along because there's plenty to say there. At least I think you've said everything as far as that goes. But one thing I really want to get into real quick, we kind of talked about it last week, and that was that cocky temperance, or the confident temperance, or however, temperate cockiness. I think that was the word that Nick used. There was none of that from Caldwell this week. He was very, very conservative.
Yeah.
When they 4th and goal, and you're on the 1, 1.5, 2, wherever they were there, and it's 7-3. You've thrown 2 fades. 1 should have been a touchdown. You have to go for that against the New England Patriots. I was extremely disappointed with kicking the field goal. Trust your defense. How many times have they gotten a safety when a team has gotten pinned down there? And another occasion was a 4th and 3 on the New England 39. I think it was maybe 14-6 or possibly 21-6 at that time. I mean, what are you doing? You're playing not to lose. You're playing like you're playing the Miami Dolphins. You're playing the New England Patriots. You have to make a move to score some points. It's not going to work. That lack of ability, that lack of flexibility really irked me. Is anybody else as upset as I am, or am I just making something out of nothing?
How about with at the end of the second quarter, with just over 2 minutes to go, they just let the clock run down to the 2-minute warning and then say, okay, whatever. It felt like
actually all right with that.
Are you? I hated it. I thought they were just giving up on the half, and then New England went and got the field goal anyway. I don't think the extra 20 seconds or whatever gives them to touchdown range or what have you. I felt like he was completely giving up on the half. I hated the 4th and goal on the 1 and kicking it might have been the 2, 1 or 2, whatever it was, kicking the field goal there when this team desperately needs to start getting in the end zone and getting touchdowns, and you know that field goal is not going to matter in the long run against New England in this game.
And we still had good Bell at that point. Bell ran for like 3 yards right up to the goal line. He was up to the goal line. I'm okay with throwing a fade, but you just ran up to the goal line with your back. You had push.
And then stop.
Had pushing through. Keep going. It wasn't like the other week when he got injured on the play before. He was still out there. Run that play.
It was completely ridiculous, and the 4th and 3 I agree with, I guess, somewhat to a lesser extent, but I still agree with your point on that one. It was on New England's 39. You go with a punt. I mean, you trust Sam Martin. He's one of the best in the league this season for sure, and to do what he does and pin him inside the 10 or what have you. But you need points. You need to move the ball, and you can't settle for something like that in this game. I think it was 21-6. You're all but giving up at that point if you're trying to punt and pin them, when you know you're not going to have that great a field position again just that easily. You have to go get points. It was very disappointing. The cocky temperance wasn't there at all, Brandon. It was passive, man, completely passive from Caldwell in this game, and I hated it for a large majority of it.
Well, and one thing I do want to say, though, about running it down to 2-minute warning, I thought it was actually very smart because they still had all 3 timeouts, and you have 2 minutes to go, 65 yards or so, 70 yards? So that's plenty of time for the offense to do their own thing. He was just trying not to leave any time left for New England. So I thought that was fine.
All right.
But again, we got to keep moving here. Otherwise, we could end up here for another 15, 20 minutes like a Hebron wormhole. So going to the defense before we get into our MVPs, or as Kent said before the show, our least disappointing. The defense. Was this a bad game for the defense? Kent, I'll go ahead and open that up for you.
Yes, it was a bad game from the defense. It was a poor called game by Terrell Austin. The team was actually executing well in the first half, but the play calls were terrible. The tackling was fine in the first half, but the guys were so far behind their receivers that they were just giving everything up. In the second half, the play calling improved, but execution kind of fell apart. So the tackling got worse. The coverages started to break down. It was the worst game they've had by defense, and it shows on the stat sheet. But it was a bad game.
But I think you did say something there. The play calling improved in the second half. And that's something we say every week, is that Austin makes some of the best adjustments in the league. And again, I thought that was true, that the play calling did improve in the second half. And you hope it's good all game, but that if there's a silver lining defensively, I did think the play calling got better in the second half. But if you're looking at notable performances from defense, our least disappointing is going to be Ayadibo. Spoiler alert, I suppose. But no one stood out, really, I didn't think, defensively. And when you get 0 sacks as a team on Tom Brady, it's not a good defensive day. They didn't get the pressure that you wanted to see or needed to see for them to compete with this New England offense. I thought Ndamukong Suh was MIA for a large part. He had one hit on Brady at one point, but overall, Brandon, there's no way to take this as a positive from either side of the ball, really. I mean, 34 points. New England's been scoring a lot more than that in recent weeks, even if you're trying to find something, but it wasn't good.
Well, I agree. Obviously, one of the biggest problems was is that the defense they got super flustered by the hurry up offense. They didn't know what was going on. They're trying to, their play call that, is whatever when they look like they're raising the roof. They're doing that, and Tom Brady's under center and snapping the ball and throwing a touchdown to Tim Wright already. That kind of stuff seemed to happen time and time again. They just couldn't get into their own groove. I hear a lot about these second half adjustments. I think it had more to do with New England than it did as much to do with Detroit. Yeah. I feel like they took their foot off the pedal just a touch.
We held them under 50.
Well, that is very true, and there were also at least two deep balls that Brady missed. That the one where Edelman's diving for the ball at about the 5, and there's another one to Brandon LaFell that went about 5 yards too long, and I think they were the same drive maybe. But connect on one of those where it's getting a little uglier. But yes, the second half was a little better. They one of the main things they did was really limit them on yards after the catch. It felt like in the second half. But we talked about Cassius Vaughn, DeAndre Levy. I was reading your buddy Alex Reno, a sideline report. His coverage has fallen off a cliff this year. He's being targeted 1 out of every 5.5 snaps. That's what Reno put in his article, and it made a lot of sense. And he's second in the league behind Anthony Barr as far as targets. People are attacking him, and it's working. With Sue, except for him forcing pretty much his own 3-and-out early, there wasn't a lot from him. Ezekiel, Ziggy Ansah. I love him, but not a great game from him. He really struggled against Nate Solder. The defense, yes, it was definitely disappointing, but I don't know that you're going to see a team like New England very often. So probably more of a one-game aberration, let's hope. But as you said, let's go ahead and dig into our MVPs before we dwell too long here again. It's Ayadibo for me as well. Aside from the big interception that kind of kept the game within striking distance, he had another big pass breakup later. He ended up with 7 tackles. He's been a huge addition to this defense. I know Nick agrees with me on Ayadibo. So Kent, we're going to throw it to you. Your least disappointing Lion for this game.
Well, I can't say Ayadibo now, so I'm actually going to go to the other side of the ball, because as much as we want to throw it on the offense for being poor, Golden Tate did a lot more than I expected to see out of him in this game. Until they started throwing Darrelle Revis on Golden Tate, he was doing fantastic. And a friend of mine had said that Tate started to give up on routes. I don't think that was what happened. I know there was a few issues where it looked like it was an option route. Tate took the under, Stafford threw the over. There was a couple of things like that. But he had Darrelle Revis on him and got stranded on Revis Island. But whenever he was not covered by Darrelle Revis, Tate was still trying to make things happen, and he never stopped. And that's more than I can say for Jeremy Ross and Corey Fuller, and even Calvin Johnson at one point started to give up on some of his routes. Tate just kept going. So for me, that's got to be worth something.
I have to commend you on that one, Kent, trying to find something to look at offensively. I tried to as well when I saw Brandon went with Iadebo. I was like, all right, let me just try and find someone on the other side of the ball. So I'll give you credit for the effort on that one. Just to get you out of here on this, and we're looking forward, and me and Brandon will do a little more on this. Looking forward to the game against Chicago. What do you expect to see from Detroit in that game, and what do you think is going to happen on Thanksgiving?
Hopefully it's going to be the same type of game that we just saw, only with Detroit on the other side. The Bears straight up gave up 2 weeks ago and 3 weeks ago. They were horrible against the Packers and the Patriots, just the worst kind of football. And they fought back against some really bad teams the last couple of weeks, but Detroit's defense should clinch back down. They should be able to hold this team down. I think you're going to see some more takeaways than we've been seeing the last couple of weeks, like none. I think you're going to start seeing the offense finally scoring points because it has to give at this point. But I think it's going to be a pretty big statement game for the Lions. They're sick that they've lost the last 2 games. They feel bad because of how it ended. Hopefully Dominic Raiola gets fired and thrown off a cliff somewhere.
Oh, but, I'll get to that. Trust me, I'm getting to that.
But aside from that, it should be a good game for Detroit. This is one of those they should win games, and I think it's going to be one of those.
You can find him on Twitter at MathBomb, and again, please go read his stuff at Sideline Report. It's more than worth your guys' time. Kent, we always appreciate it. This is definitely an extended session, and we appreciate you sitting with us and chatting over a game no one really wants to talk about for too long here.
Thank you, guys. It's always fun, even when it's, not.
Right. Thanks, Kent.
Yeah, bye.
All right. So that was Kent Lee Platte. Again, he's at MathBomb on Twitter, and you can find his stuff on Sideline Report. Brandon, let's go ahead and let's try and wrap a bow on this wonderful Patriots game if we can. If there is a most disappointing, if you have to single just the one guy out, who are you going with?
Well, I would different options, and let me say, this conversation is going so long. I'm gonna have to text my girlfriend, so you should bring me some more scotch. I didn't really plan on this, but Cassius Vaughn was definitely a front runner, but I don't expect a lot out of him, I guess. So for me, it's actually Glover Quinn. I know he had, I think, 10 tackles and 5 defensive stops, so he did some good things in the running game, which the Lions always do, but he got caught watching the quarterback quite a bit. He was responsible for Wright's second touchdown. He saw him go to run the out, and he looked at him, and he looked back at the quarterback, and then all of a sudden he went, oh, and he started to scramble over there, and it was way too late. On passes targeted to guys he was covering, he allowed 131.8 passer rating. Granted, it's Tom Brady on the other side, but still very disappointing.
Yeah, and I'm going with the offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi, and Kent said this play calling was actually a little bit better this week, and partially I agree, and this is more so an indictment on the season as a whole than just this game, but I haven't seen much improvement, if any, out of Lombardi in the play calling as it stands. I loved how early he got the ball to Tate on the screen, but then I felt like they could have went back to that later. When you don't have an offensive line or you have one that's struggling this much, quick passes, quick screens, quick slants, whatever you need to do, move the pocket, get Stafford moving just to try and get rid of the negativity from the offensive line, how bad it is, the lack of blocking that it's providing. I just didn't feel like there was enough variety to it. They kept committing to Joique Bell up the middle with the run when that clearly wasn't there and wasn't working. I mean, the problems persist, and I don't see the week-to-week improvement play calling wise to warrant Joe Lombardi and what he's doing right now. Definitely my most disappointing, more so on the season than it is just this game.
Well, yeah, there's been a lot of things that he's been disappointing. And granted,
right.
I thought he did a little better this game. But moving on, as far as we have been doing, maybe I'm just responding to the peer pressure you put down last week of we're doing too many unsung heroes. Well, fine. Here's an unsung GOAT. It's Jeremy.
It's easy to go GOAT this week. Come on.
Very true. There was the abysmal drop in the end zone that just, I mean, it was crushing. But he averaged 2.5 yards per punt return. The reason I laugh is my girlfriend did bring me another drink. She must have heard me. But yeah, there's a big drop in the end zone, and it's. I don't know what happened to his return game. He used to be the guy that excelled at making that cut and then getting up the field. That's how you return punts. That's how you return kicks. And now he's it's like he's infatuated with his own legend of returning. He's just looking for that hole by running east and west, and he's not finding it.
That's we haven't really touched on that this season, but yeah, where has Jeremy Ross been in the return game, and where has that electricity been? I haven't seen it either. Let me go with another guy, receiver Corey Fuller. Just we talked about the lack of a visor on his one missed touchdown in the end zone. It went right through his arms. He had another one later in the game that not as people notice, I don't think, but just drops you can't have in the end zone. There's a ton of goats in this game, guys. You can pick any number of guys. I'm just highlighting someone else, and not to just rail against Fuller, but those were catches that were points that came off the board because he didn't make them. I mean, Fourier had the same thing. We saw Ross, and there's so many ways you can go with this. I'll say Fuller. That's not just the only unsung goat. There's tons that we can get to. Let's try and move on from this New England game, guys. Let's all just take a nice deep breath. Brandon, take some scotch. And we're going to look forward to a game next week against the Bears where Detroit still has a chance to get a division win here and stay right in the middle of this playoff race. As it stands right now, as we move to our news and notes, Detroit's actually 7th in the NFC picture, just outside of a really competitive playoff picture. So a must-win, I think we can say that moving forward. They all are. So we'll look forward to Chicago. First, we'll touch on some news and notes. Nick Fairley, Larry Warford, and Reggie Bush didn't play in this game. Still no word on what's going on with Warford or what to expect with that. We need him on that offensive line terribly. Reggie Bush, I thought, was expected to play all the way up until Sunday when suddenly he wasn't. He wasn't going to make a difference either way. That's just the honest truth, as sad as it is. I say maybe he'll make a difference on Thursday against the Bears, but as you'll see from both of us, we're not expecting it. Nick Fairley is someone they desperately need back on that defensive line. Riley Reif got hurt, did not come back into this one. Cornelius Lucas, as we said, is not a suitable replacement, so hopefully we get more word on Reif, and we'll put it on Facebook and Twitter when we do have it. Brandon, give me what you saw on Ndamukong Suh being a little bit upset.
Well, and this is per Bleacher Report's Jason Cole. They had a video that they put up there, and his exact quote of Cole. I thought about bringing the audio, but considering we're already running so long, we're not going to bring in another 2.5-minute video. But his quote was that he had talked to sources close to Suh, and that Suh was vastly disappointed with how the defense played. He expressed disappointment in the lack of variance in the coverage schemes, so that not enough was done to confuse Brady. And he expects that it will influence his decision this offseason.
Oh, whatever.
I'm going to go ahead and say I don't believe that at all. I think he's a businessman. We'll go where the money is. And he still – what defense are you going to? One, that has stopped the Patriots. Two, that is higher ranked than Detroit. So I think we could go ahead and move right on from that.
Yeah. So let's say he's trying to make his decision in the offseason. Do you remember that game in the middle of the season against New England? I was just really disappointed with how we played that game. That's why I'm leaving Detroit for sure.
Yeah, Terrell Watts has been a genius all year, but we got this one thing. So, and this could be, and I'm not putting this on Jason Cole, who has done a nice job over there. I'm saying that these sources are probably, they just want to be relevant. There is one thing I want to get into with those injuries real quick. I'm very concerned about Riley Reif because, we only have 3 days in between games, so there's been nothing out there yet. They said that the Detroit Lions did release a practice report, even though they didn't practice. The guys that wouldn't practice were Fairley, Iadivo, Johnson, Palmer, Reif, and Warford. So and some of the things I'm hearing is that, and of course Jim Caldwell wouldn't comment, but that Adrian Waddle will play left tackle if Reif isn't ready to go, which I'm fine with that. Yeah. Real quick, though, we want to talk about the playoff picture. Like you said, Detroit's on the outside looking in, and the people that they're going to be fighting against are Seattle, Arizona, San Francisco, Dallas, Philadelphia, and Green Bay, obviously for the division. We could probably go ahead and scratch Green Bay off a team that they're going to overtake, at least I think. I don't know that maybe that division will be on the line later. I just think Green Bay is in no matter what. I think probably Arizona. Do we agree on that?
Arizona's in, yeah.
So then we're looking at they're tied with Seattle and San Francisco in a game behind Dallas and Philly, who both play each other twice. I think San Francisco and Seattle both play each other twice.
Yeah.
So as it stands right now, do you feel somewhat confident about Detroit's chances going against, having to make a wild card against at least 3 of those 4 teams?
Yeah, as much as we've railed on this team in this game, and let me also note real quickly, watching Monday Night Football, just watch Danny Gore get owned by Kenny Stills on a pass score, almost picked it, and then Stills just stole it from him. So I think we all miss Danny Gore here in Detroit. But I still think this team can compete for the division. I'm not even ruling that out with Green Bay. I think the schedule for Detroit shapes up a lot easier. Again, this is a team that hasn't scored a touchdown for 3 weeks. But, yeah, I still think they can compete for the division. I really think they actually set up better than a Seattle or a San Francisco does for the playoffs. Just I think Seattle and San Francisco are going to beat up on each other, and their schedules are not favorable at all. So as bad as it's been, it can quickly get a lot better with some favorable games for Detroit, starting here with Chicago. So I still fully believe they will make the playoffs, as crazy as it might sound after watching them play so bad against New England.
Well, and another thing is that Seattle plays Philadelphia, so
Yeah.
and Dallas has to play Indy, albeit at home, where the reports are that Dallas's home games aren't much of a home game because they have so many travelers that one want to go see the stadium and people are selling their tickets because tough times and economy and whatever. But so I still. My biggest concern, I think that Detroit can handle these next 3 games. I'm a little nervous about Minnesota just because they have that frisky look to them. They did play well against Green Bay, but that game was at home. Detroit's already won in Minnesota. They will have them at Ford Field. So they have Tampa, Chicago, and Minnesota at home. I think they get those 3, which, well, spoiler alert. But the key game is going to be at Chicago. Hopefully by then Chicago's season is completely in the tank, but we'll see as we go. Well, I guess that's perfect time to go ahead and move on to the Chicago game. I think we can all say that we are very thankful that it's the Chicago Bears on Thanksgiving after that rough 2-game stretch that saw Detroit play the 2 teams with the best record in the NFL. They're 5-6. They've won their last 2. They didn't look good beating Tampa Bay 21-10. Tampa
21-13, yeah.
Yeah, Tampa was leading for a good portion of that game. I don't know how to explain them. Their defense is still terrible. Lance Briggs did get hurt, and he's obviously at least somewhat one of their best players. Well, let's just go ahead and dive into it. Nick, what scares you about the Chicago Bears?
It's tough to find what exactly scares. There's so many weapons. There's that word again. There's so many good players on the Bears offense, and they're really just an enigma, trying to figure out what's wrong with Chicago. And I think a lot of it comes down to Jay Cutler and how he hasn't enhanced his game as much as everyone expected he would with Mark Trestman there. And this season's really just been terrible for Chicago. Some really bad losses. The one against Green Bay that everyone saw, I think that was a national game where they lost 55-14 a couple weeks ago, and right before that they got blown out by New England in Week 8. I mean, this team is just for as good as they should be, and I actually thought they were going to go to the Super Bowl this season, and I think you as well. You had them win in the division when we did our preseason thing, didn't you? Yeah. I mean, this team doesn't make any sense for as good as they should be, but they still have things that should scare you. I mean, when you look and you see Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffrey at receiver, those are still 2 scary players when they're both healthy, and Marshall especially has battled some stuff this year, and Jeffrey, just because Cutler hasn't been as good, hasn't been putting up the numbers you thought he might this season. But I mean, they can still do damage in a hurry. Matt Forte has still had a great season in spite of what's been going on in Chicago, so he's tremendously scary. But just that duo of Marshall and Jeffrey, with how the D line's banged up right now, and they're not getting the pressure that you want them to. I think the routes and the time will be there for Marshall and Jeffrey to get open, and if they do, I mean, they can put points on the board in a hurry.
Yeah, that duo is. I've got a featured an article I have going up in the morning regarding. Actually, I think I might have just pushed publish while we were talking because, well, I'm weird. But yeah, they're insane. I mean, they have, I believe, 111 catches or something between them, or actually 110, just about 1,400 yards and 13 touchdowns, and they go 6'4", 6'3". They're too much for any defensive back to really handle, much less dealing with both of them. But what really scares me is that you could have such a nice vocabulary with busting out words like microcosm and enigma, yet you can't see the nuances of Eric Ebron's game.
Oh, God, please. Brandon, I have a headache. I took some Excedrin during Kent was talking at one point. Please don't make me get back into Eric Ebron right now. I don't have time for it.
Well, from one tight end to another, the guy that actually scares me, and he's probably
Eric Ebron's a weapon. He's not a tight end, man. He's a pass catcher. He's a weapon. He is not just a tight end.
That's very true. But from one tight end to another, the guy that actually probably flies under a lot of people's radar is Martellus Bennett. I kind of touched on earlier about the fact that teams are exposing Detroit's linebackers. I mean, Charles Clay did well, Rob Gronkowski, Tim Wright, Greg Olson. Those guys all burned the linebackers for a decent number of yards and catches. Granted, Clay's average wasn't that great. But Bennett comes into this game. He has more catches than Brandon Marshall. He has 57. He has more yards than Brandon. He has 10 more yards than Brandon Marshall with 628, and he has 5 touchdowns. That's not good for this defense. He is a guy who can really hurt them, especially if hopefully the defensive line is able to get after Cutler. So if he needs to make those quick passes, you've got to worry about a guy like Martellus Bennett sitting in the hook zone or doing those little digs or outs. So to me, that is the scariest part of the Chicago offense. So we'll move on now to what is Detroit's biggest advantage in this game, Nick?
And even with it banged up.
Ron?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, that's Chicago's biggest advantage. Same as every other week, really. It's the defensive line, and even not knowing Fairley's status and it still being banged up, Chicago does not have a good offensive line. Now, as much as I think Chicago could be able to withstand Detroit's defensive line as it stands, they're still capable of taking over at any time with Ansah and Sue, especially if those two get it going. They're still among the best in football when they want to be. And Terrell Austin, give them a couple days to scheme against the Chicago team, which doesn't have an imposing offensive line. They could take advantage in a big way. And I don't see another spot where Detroit has as big of an advantage as Sue and Ansah being able to get after a quarterback who loves to make mistakes when given the opportunity.
Well, and that's why I originally, and in our rundown it still says it, but I like to throw some curveballs every now and then. I had Jay Cutler, mostly because I think it's funny.
I segued you into Cutler. Come on, man.
But yeah, when that defensive line gets humming and gets after Cutler, you never know what Cutler's going to do. He's always liable for a poor throw or two. But actually, what's really going to benefit this team is that, well, they have Golden Tate, and what I mean is the only two guys in the secondary to grade in the positive are Tim Jennings and Ryan Mundy. The safeties are going to be dealing with a lot of things over the top as far as you're going to bracket Calvin Johnson. You have to. He's always killed this team. They don't have Tillman. He's hurt, and also 72 or 3 now. But regardless, he's out for the year. So they're going to have to focus some power on Megatron. And granted, we'll get into that another time. We do not have time for it now, whether he is still Megatron or just Tron. But Golden Tate is going to have a lot of room to work with in this game. He's not going to have Darrell Reeves hounding him all over the field or Antonio Grimaldi or Patrick Peterson. I think this is a game where those wide receivers can actually shine. Whether the guys up front will give them any time to or not, that's a different subject. But if they can get Tate the ball on the short throws or even Calvin Johnson, I think that is the biggest advantage that they have in this game. And for that, it really is about the offense this week. I think the defense will be fine. They'll rebound just well. They're not playing New England. They're not playing Tom Brady. They're playing Jay Cutler. So to me, the Lions will win if they open up the game with a touchdown. They have been getting down the field. They have gotten into the opponent's territory. They just can't finish drives. So I think what they need to do is they need to come out and they need to score a touchdown right away, say this is who we are, kind of reestablish an identity that this is a team that can put up points and instill some confidence, and I think they can go from there.
Yeah, well, I'm not holding my breath for that one, but it'd be great to see. Matt Forte is the cog that really moves Chicago's offense, and he's been great all season, as I mentioned earlier. He's someone that has played well in spite of what's been going on around him. And if you can hold Forte under 100 total yards, now he's someone that gets a ton of yards receiving as well as rushing. I think if Detroit's defense holds him under 100 yards, that really stagnates Chicago's offense entirely and doesn't allow them to do what they want to do balance-wise offensively. So keep him under 100 total yards. I think the Lions win this game. I don't know what that means for the Lions offense, but I know that shuts down what Chicago wants to do enough that maybe their 7 field goals wins them this game. Brandon, As far as
I have to cut in real quick because I saw some great tweets when Detroit was down 21. So he's like, "Well, they're only 7 possessions out of this game, or 7 field goals." That
field goals back.
Yeah, somebody responded, "Well, yeah, but how many Matt Prater kicks is that? 12 should do it."
Right. Oh yeah. Oh God. Oh yeah. Prater missed a 53-yarder in this one. I can't get on him too much for that. It's a tough field goal.
Yeah,
But
and it was a close miss.
it really was. So yeah, Prater was fine here. But game prediction, Brandon. Who do you think the Lions get the bounce back that they sorely need in this one?
As much as everybody is spitting out their Kool-Aid now and promising that, like the guy like the town drunk who said, I haven't had a drink in a week, that they never drank the Kool-Aid, they never believed. You come back to the table, I'll pour you just a little Ziggy-sized shot so you can sit next to me and we can talk about this and talk out the issues. I do think Detroit gets back on the right track this week. They're at home. Chicago's just as beat up as Detroit as far as having to turn it around in 3 days. Defense is something that's more consistent than offense. I don't think Detroit explodes offensively. I think they will be able to move the ball, but I haven't seen enough to trust them in the red zone. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to go with Lions by final score of 19-14.
Yeah, I still think the Lions are going to find a way to win this one. We both went with the Pats last week. We'll get to that with our predictions. But yeah, if the Lions find a way to lose this one against Chicago, then I'll go ahead and hit the panic button on next week's show and say this was one they had to have, and now the playoffs, I think, are a long shot. But as it stands now, go ahead and beat Chicago, move to 8-4. You're still in a good spot playoff-wise, I think, and I think they will get it done. Give me the Lions 24-20. Now, granted, that does mean 3 touchdowns. I'm calling for 3 Lions touchdowns. We'll see if it happens. I know that's a tall order.
Sure, 8 field goals?
Yeah, right. I know it's a tall order the way that, what is it, 12 safeties? I don't know. However the Lions need to get to 24, they'll find a way to do it. Give me Lions 24-20. We both have close scores in this one on Thanksgiving. Hoping it's a great game. As far as bold predictions go, let me start with where we're at on these things as it stands now. We both went 1-1 this past week. We both picked Pats, so we got that. I had the Lions with no turnovers, and they were a fluky Matthew Stafford pick for making that come to fruition. So I'm a little beat up about that one. I go to 8-12. Brandon moves to 11-9. Had the Pats. He also had the Lions with 6 or fewer penalties. Unfortunately, they showed up with 9 in this contest. So. He still has a nice, comfortable lead in this thing. Let's see if I can get a bump here. We both have the Lions, so I'm not going to gain ground there. I need to hit a bold prediction, something I haven't done, I believe, since week 3. And I'm saying Detroit scores a touchdown in this game. Brandon, do you let it stand?
No.
Okay. Well, then give me this. This is bold. I think they're going to have 3 passing touchdowns in this game. I don't like Chicago's secondary, and I don't trust them. I trust them even less than I do Detroit's offense at this point, and I think at home on Thanksgiving, Detroit figures it out. Call me a homer or a sucker or whatever you want. I think this is a game where Detroit's offense really does figure it out, and I don't think the running game is going to figure it out all season. I think it's the passing game that gets going. Give me 3 passing touchdowns for Detroit against the Bears.
I'm not going to call you a homer or a sucker. I'm going to call you smart because I think you listened to me about the advantages.
Oh, that wasn't it. I promise.
Golden Tate. You're starting to come around, Nick.
I was busy. I was publishing an article while you were talking. I don't even know.
No, but I'm kind of going, well, it's somewhat connected. I'm going 100 yards and a touchdown for Calvin Johnson. I know that might not seem that bold on the surface, but it kind of is. And I think what's going to happen is he's a proud man, just like everybody else. Stafford is probably going to take more offense to this. Calvin Johnson is done, is dead. His career is over. Hey, he's still okay, but he's not Megatron anymore. They're going to come out. He's going to make a statement, and he does pretty well against the Bears if they don't have Tillman on him. So I think he gets at least 100 yards, and I think he gets a score. And that's obviously going to push me ahead of you, probably looking at 13-9 next week. Another thing that, well, I don't even really need a push this week, but I guess I'll go ahead and bring it up. We have our season-long bet. Who will score more fantasy points, Reggie Bush or Joique Bell? I, being the smart one, the wiser, the elder statesman of this podcast, took Joique Bell, and my wisdom is paying off to the tune of 106-68. Nick.
Tight race.
Are you getting concerned about what your avatar or your profile picture is going to be? I've got so many
No.
ideas.
Reggie said he's playing on Thursday, and you know he could spring a big one at any time. So no, yeah, I'm pretty darn worried about that. What am I down by 38 or something at this point? And Reggie Bush is probably good for 2 games the rest of the way. I've all but written that off, so I'm just what it is. If it comes back, I'll feel great, but I've already put it out in my rearview mirror. Um, One thing I also, and I meant to rail on this earlier when Kent mentioned it real quickly. What Dominic Raiola did in that game was just despicable. I didn't know what spot to work this in at, but that was just that cut block when Detroit took a knee, and then afterwards he said it was just football. He's trying to hurt people out there, and then he throws a sucker punch afterwards. Just I cannot stand Dominic Raiola. I cannot stand what happened there, and I just wanted to at least mention it. And I know we try and say the positive things about this team, but sometimes there's something just negative, and someone does something so despicable as what Dominic Raiola did. I am completely against it. I hate what he did. I hate him as a player. I cannot believe his answer for it afterwards. I heard Caldwell took him aside and gave him a few choice words. I hope that's true, because that is the complete opposite of what the NFL should be about, and he should be completely ashamed of himself. Even though I know he's not. He's just not a good human being. Brandon, I can't say enough bad things about Dominic Raiola and what he did there.
Wow, I kind of wish that I knew about the Jim Caldwell taking him aside. There is a great skit in there somewhere, like,
It's got to be.
Dominic, I need you to not do that next time. This is me in my angry voice.
Can
Don't
you
make me
imagine
go.
Jim Caldwell angry?
I'm at a 9 right now. You don't want to see me get to a 10. but folks, we would love to hear from you on what you think of Raiola and his, well, continued antics that have just, gosh, especially with his play. Maybe they've run their course as far as Detroit is concerned. Also, I would love to hear your thoughts on what Nick's profile picture should be for both Twitter and Facebook, of course. I'm not going to keep it exclusive to one. You can find us on Facebook at Lions Central Radio. You can find the show on Twitter at Lions Central PFC. You can find me personally on Twitter, Brandon Alisoglu. That's ALISOGLU. And you can find Nick Kostora if you try really hard, and I don't know, if you have maybe 2, 3 Ziggy shots, whatever works for you, but at Nick Kostora, Kostora.
We're looking forward to a Lions win on Turkey Day and maybe a couple of nice Eric Ebron drops to go along with it. Until then, for Brandon Alisoglu, I am Nick Kostora. Thank you so much for tuning in to Lions Central Radio.
I swear to God, I hate you.